to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It's a science thing. It is a science place. It's a scientific fact. They were all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Special Quarantimes edition, Sunday edition, special edition of Protonic Reversal today. Former guest of the show. He was on with his band, the Bismarck, Eric Fundingsland, who also has an excellent movie that has been making the rounds on the tubes of you. The incredible "Why Are We Doing This" documentary, and I'm very, very excited to have him on. I've known him for years, longer than he's even been making this documentary, which is saying a lot. And I would say it's one of the more important films of the year from my perspective. And Eric, welcome back to the show. I can go ahead and say right now that your sound is way better than when you were on last time, and I had some distorted accents.
No, it's okay. That was the first time I was ever louder than Dan Moore. So
very, very good. The documentary, I mean, obviously, you know my feelings on it. I think the documentary is wonderful, and it's a special thing that needed to exist. I'm trying to remember when I first heard about you making it. It might have been about 10 years ago. Does that sound about right? I mean, you would.
Okay, so here's the thing. I had this in the back of my mind ever since I heard the Type Bros from way back when tell me the story of them kicking their drummer out, which has to be 2001 is when they told me, I think. And I think maybe Quiddy told me this story, or Dave. I knew both of them back then. And that was about it. I didn't know anyone else in that band. I didn't know Jared at all. But they told me this story, and I just thought to myself, like, that. Well, first they told me about the complaints log, and I thought, well, that's a brilliant thing to do on tour. But I guess maybe not. See how things ended up. But I thought it was a good idea.
At bare minimum, if not, if not useful for the long-term emotional stability of the band members.
Well, anywho, and I just thought, like, well, that's funny. Just filed it away. And then later on, Dave was in a band called Nudity, and I knew it was at that point it was him and Quiddy and this guy named Aaron Ross. And I think that's kind of when I knew Aaron a little bit, and he told me about them getting robbed, and I was just like, well, okay, well, there's another one, and it just kind of filed away in the back of my mind. And I don't remember where the nudist colony story fit in with Nudity, and that must have been Dave must have told me that one, because I don't think I knew anyone else was in the band at the time. I think he was the only person I knew. There's so many members of that band. It was always a different thing. It seemed like they, and they told me a story about that. And I was just like, well, that's great too. And then just somewhere along the line, I just thought about, hey, it'd be great if someone just made a movie that was literally just silly stories that happen to bands that aren't very famous on tour. And all the kind of stuff that actually the stuff they had to deal with came later. It was just going to be a movie about, here's a story, they're going to tell the story, I'll get as many members as I can to tell the story, move on to the next one. I was like, it's either going to be a movie or it's just going to be something I do I put one up a month or something like that. And
Right.
as I started interviewing people, they would tell a story and then they go, but you know what I really hate on tour? And then they tell a story about,
Right.
when you stay at a place and they want to party and I just
Yeah.
want to sleep.
All you want to do is sleep. Exactly.
And then I'd start talking to him. I'd be like, well, yeah, me. And this is a thing that happened in my band. And then it started kind of, spitballing from there. So I just kind of kept writing down incidents, so to say. So it's like the first couple of people that I interviewed aren't in the movie as much because they were the first people I interviewed, and I only asked them like the 7 questions that I had at the time. And it came as the more people I got in it, the more questions I got, or scenarios.
The scope and it kind of changed and revealed itself as you were going through it. And I suppose I think it would be disingenuous. I'm sorry to interrupt the flow, but
That's right.
The Bismarck are an interesting band for a number of reasons, not the least of which is because you've been an avid documentarian of that band almost the entire time, and that is especially rare amongst unknown bands, and so that's something where you clearly had an eye for what is just misery and what is entertaining misery already. Yeah. Based on that band and those documentaries.
Sure.
So
yeah.
and of course the brilliant documentary, it starts with the Bismarck guys, and it starts off with what we could only call a classic Bismarck story for any fan of the band.
Yeah, a classic Bismarcking.
Right, exactly. But did you find that as you were listening to people tell your stories, they kind of sorted themselves as far as, oh, that kind of goes into like this category of versus thinking they have a unique experience, and it's like, oh, maybe that's actually an archetype for a reason.
Yeah, well, sometimes I just start them off with a simple question, and then they just go off. It's like some people would just. And then I'd find like, okay, that, I'd have a little notebook and I'd be like, that goes in this category, or the category showed up later too. Like, kind of like the, where don't you like to play question really was more of a, like, an odd experience kind of, because, there's that whole part where a lot of people say that, well, I don't like to play Fargo, but they didn't necessarily say they didn't like to play Fargo. They just had a kind of an odd experience there, with the exception of, I think Isaac was the only one who said he didn't like to play Fargo. I also do not like to play Fargo. And I found it funny that so many other people had all these stories of Fargo. And I didn't prompt them at all. I literally just asked them, where's a place you don't like to play? Where's a place you had an odd experience? And almost everyone had a story about Fargo. And I thought that was hilarious. I couldn't believe it.
That is funny. I mean, there is enough commonality of purpose with a lot of the stories in there that, one has to wonder if it was something that, was it prompted, or did it kind of just reveal itself? And it kind of makes it better when it's just, the Gestalt, the Jungian collective unconsciousness touring band that's being laid forth.
No, and I haven't had anyone in the comments. There's numerous comments on the movie now. I haven't had one single person say, "Oh, it's very clear that he's just prompting them to get these answers." I didn't at all. I literally just asked. Well, I interviewed you. I literally just asked everyone the exact same questions. And, so something weird that happened was, Isaac, Tim, and Dan all brought up trying to, take a crap on tour. And it's just, I didn't ask them about it. They just said, it's really annoying is trying to do just these simple things on tour, like eating, trying to find a place to sleep, and honestly trying to take a dump. Like it's tough.
Things that are considered incredibly mundane everyday activities suddenly become micro adventures that don't always have happy endings, so to speak. And I think that's one of the reasons I think the documentary is very strong, is because it presents this thing from, I don't even know if you could charitably say, like, the working class of touring bands. It's pretty much for folks that certainly more than a hobby, but less than a lifestyle. And I think that when it has been deigned to be explored, the focus is always on something completely different. And usually, the pursuit of fame, or this, and later they're on tour buses and this, and like there's a narrative structure to it that's been that's been railroaded into people's minds through like, you're behind the music's, almost famous, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And what I like about the different types of people that you have within the film is that it's not that they're bad because they're unknown or anything, but these are people that are very devoted to what they're doing. And you have a wide swath, there's certain some folks that are like, indie rock famous or whatnot, but it almost doesn't matter the bands and people are, because what you're talking about is this is like a representation of people that make certain lifestyle choices to do this thing. So it's in the title. Why am I doing this? And I think that's the strength of it is, and again, never look for wisdom in the comments, but some people seem to have missed that point entirely.
Very few, though, I'll say. I think, I looked I read the comments. I respond to a lot of them. Yeah. And most everyone gets the point of the movie, which I didn't think anyone was going to. I thought there was going to be a small percentage of people got it, and the wide majority of people would be like, I don't get it. But it's the other way around. It seems to be almost every comment seems to be like, oh no, I totally see where this movie's coming from. A lot of people said, I'm glad someone made something like this. So I can show it to someone and be like, this is what touring's like.
This is what it's actually like. Yeah, exactly.
And and it's not to say that there aren't good shows on tour. Of course there's good shows on tour, but what do you say about a good show? You're like, that show was good. And that's about it.
It doesn't make for a great story, but it does happen. The honesty of it, and sort of for lack of a better term, like the focus on like some of the more mundane aspects, and just like the difficulty of environmental things, things that are out of your control that nobody even thinks about unless they've also done it. Like thinking back to the band that playing the show, and then they were like, it was a wake for somebody in that town, and was like, oh my god,
it was
like,
in Fargo, by the way.
In Fargo, and they're like, oh my god, we can just not play, it'd be fine. Oh no, we totally we want, and it's like, that the awkwardness of being in a situation like that. Yep. And just little moments like that I thought were very strong and compelling, as you well know. I've lived a lot of them myself, so of course I'm looking for them, but the focus being on showing that side of it, that just is a story that flat out doesn't get told. I thought was. Yep. I'm glad it's important that it exists, but it's also important that it's good, is what I'm driving.
And I can tell you, when I hit the publish button on that, I didn't think anyone was going to watch it, honestly. I thought, like, you guys, my friend, a bunch of friends of mine, my bandmates, my mom, that'd be it. I think I was preparing myself for 3,000 views tops, maybe. And
at the time of this airing, it's 71,957, which is 10,000 more than last time I looked at it. So
I know, that's pretty nuts. But it is going down. But hey, whatever. I'm fine. That's like it's like box office. It was opening weekend. That's the big one, and then it peters off.
So that's a not what I was going with it, but
people still watch it, and I still get comments.
Yeah. Do you have any? Obviously, it's COVID times. Movie theaters are having a rough go of it in general. But do you have any plans for like a screening, like screening like with like a show from one of the bands or something along those lines? Is that even like on the radar at this point?
Maybe. Yeah, well, the idea was I was gonna just kind of hold off and show it, start it off like that, and then honestly, what prompted me was that I saw that Dave Grohl was going to release his documentary, so I kind of like, okay, I threw the gauntlet down about a week or two before I released it, and just said, okay, well, I have to get it done before him, right. and so I just like furiously finished up the thing. There's a lot of stuff in there that I threw in literally the day before, and didn't know if it was going to work or not. And I watched it, and my wife and I were watching it, drinking like whiskey, and I'm like, I don't know, I guess it's good enough. And I hit the button, and I woke up the next day, and I don't know how many messages about it the next day. I mean, my phone was I thought it was like an Amber Alert situation. I was like, what? Is there an earthquake? What's going on? Someone kidnapped? What happened? And
Yeah, oh, some terrible disasters occurred.
just random people sent me all these messages. And that was, like overnight. Yeah.
Well, I can only imagine because, I mean, again, in the interest of full disclosure, I myself am in this film a few times, and I was not at home, and I suddenly started getting like text messages, emails, Instagram, Facebook from people I haven't talked to in forever. Just being like, "Hey, I just watched it." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Just
what are you talking about? Same thing happened to me.
So good. And then I finally was like, "Oh, the documentary must be it." And I didn't even get a chance to watch it until like maybe like 4 or 5 days after it came out, and I loved every second of it.
You're recording though, right? At the time,
yeah. And well, I almost wish I could have watched it while we were still recording, because I didn't realize that the Type Rose story kind of ends the. I mean, not to spoiler alert, but the Type Rose story with Dale playing drums kind of ends the movie. I was glad to be surprised by it, but it was anyway. It was certainly
something. Yeah. Well, some other time.
Another time, yeah. He's got YouTube. The thing that gets me is that a lot of people I heard from are people that maybe they used to tour, but they don't anymore, or well, I mean, freaking no one's touring right now. I mean, let's be real. But what I mean in the
or have no idea that they're going to tour in the future. Really,
right, exactly. So it's like a wide swath of people that it doesn't. Where I'm driving at is it's not just people that are in the movie. It's not just people that like actively. Where's a big part of their life. It's people that have maybe been on the outside periphery of that. And then it kind of seemed like after about a week or so, it was starting to get to like the people that even aren't in that at all, or like maybe they have this vague idea about what tour is that have little representation for actual reality. And that's where I think the documentary is doing the work of like, if somebody, if you can get your parents to watch it or whatever, and then like they would have a better idea of it, but then also kind of get the ennui, and then also like the mundane glory that comes of it, and get just a that it's of what it is. And I think that's awesome. Like I never, that's certainly the hope, when you hear someone that has got some talent doing something like this, you hope it gets to a few people. But it seems like it's kind of has these waves of people engaging with it. Have you found that? I mean, I know there's been people reaching out about. Have any of those been like very surprising interactions where kind of like, oh wow, that person?
The guitarist in Alice Cooper's band. That was weird.
Yeah,
sent me a personal message about it.
That's great.
And I just like, I don't know who this guy is, and but I just think I just wrote thanks. And I looked later and I was like, oh, that's fine. It's the guitarist in Alice Cooper's band. Oh, okay. Hey, good. I'm glad that, that people, who, are obviously making a living at it can still watch it. And because there's always that thing where you find people that, they are making a living at making music. So it's not a crapshoot every show. You're going to make a certain amount of money. The shows are probably all going to be the same. They always talk about the olden days, the old, when I was in the van and we didn't know what's going to happen. So, anyone who will, if you're starting off, you'll probably like it. If that was 20 years ago, you'd probably like the movie still, if you play music. Sorry, if I can tell a story real quick.
Oh, please. That's why you're on the show, my bro.
Oh yeah, to talk. I'm so used to interviewing people. Well, anyways, there was one person who wrote a comment on YouTube, and it was something along the lines of, well, these bands are doing it wrong. You got to play like 7 days a week for X amount of time, and you have to get a guarantee. You have to do all this stuff, and I never lost any money. And at the end of it, he says, I was in a cover band, but that's beside the point. Exactly.
Really, though, is that really beside the point? Is there like,
I didn't say anything. Sometimes I comment on things, sometimes I don't. I didn't comment on that one, but if I would have said something along the lines of, if you lose money in a cover band, then you are really doing something wrong.
You're really fucking up there, bro.
But maybe a different type of music experience touring, but
sure. And that's something where, of course, if you have anything that shows something, people are going to immediately be, well, what about, the other thing that you didn't show? Well, go make a movie about that. This is
well, I have a whole bunch of stuff that didn't make the cut. I mean, like a whole bunch of stuff didn't make the cut. Most of it was kind of mundane stuff that I didn't think was very interesting. Eventually I'll release it. I'll find a way to put it together.
So you segued into something I was going to ask you about a little earlier, which is to say that the stuff that's on the quote unquote cutting room floor, you worked on this for a long time, and you had reams and reams and reams of footage. So tough decisions to be made. What happens with that? Is there going to be a physical release with like bonus scenes? Is there going to be and then I guess a follow up to that is, did you have to make some tough decisions?
Oh no, if I make if I do some bonus stuff, it's going to be only the good stuff that I left out. It's not going to just me. There are some stories that didn't kind of go anywhere. You start sometimes, people start telling the story, then they go like, and then just kind of ended, and they go, I guess that's not interesting. And that didn't make the cut. There were a bunch of questions that didn't make the cut that I asked everybody. I can't think of one off the top of my head. There's a whole part about routing tours and how difficult it is if you're on the coasts.
Yes.
And which is interesting, but if something's got to go, like, I'm going to get rid of that.
Yeah, I mean that could almost be like a mini documentary in and of itself, as someone that has have to think deeply about that many times over the years. And I think that that's something where I found it admirable that it had focus, because I think there's even whatever, it's not the movie we're talking about, but I saw the Dave Grohl movie and I thought the last half hour sort of shifted into a completely different movie of like, why is this, why are you doing
what
that?
Happened here?
Who cares about this? Is dumb. I don't care about that. tell me more like Ringo Starr telling a tour story of the Beatles with the windshield getting blown out. Okay, great. That's awesome. That's what I wanted more of. And I think the only thing that, and all those types of stories all are in your movie. And I think the only thing that's going against it is that like they're not household names. But that's the point. Right. That's not a bug. That's a feature. And I think that, thank you for my TED Talk, by the way. That's but I guess.
And I didn't really want, it would have been nice to have gotten a big name person in there. I just would have asked them the exact same questions. But I did kind of want to cut it off at a certain point, because I want it to be, really the focus of the movie is that there's people who have been doing this for decades that never achieved any type of lasting fame. They can't, as in to say, they can't live off of it. It's not their livelihood.
And like, again, more than a hobby, less than a lifestyle, like it is in that weird middle ground.
Yeah. And so it kind of, I think it would have thrown off the thing if I would have had Dave Grohl in it, for example.
Which is just hilarious to me that you had that as your tag for many years before that. It was like, of course, and then he made his fucking tour. Of course he did.
So if I could take, wait, how long are we gonna be doing this? Because I do have a thing with that. If you want to, the thing with Dave Grohl, that's something that I just kind of said to people when I told them that I was going to make this movie. I said, I just want you to know Dave Grohl's not going to be in this, and it always got a laugh because it's because Dave Grohl's in all of these things. I have nothing against him at all. No. It is just funny.
It's like he's ubiquitous in these types of documentaries, and like it's funny because it's acknowledgement and self-awareness of the genre, while also kind of that can be a bit of an icebreaker too, because then that gives you an idea of like, oh wow, because what's your preconceptions of those kinds of movies? Okay, throw that out the window. This is going to be a little different.
Yeah, well, and and also that tagline, whiskey, might have had something to do with it, because like I think I wrote the synopsis later, and the only thing I wrote the first night, if I remember correctly, was 100% Dave Grohl free. And I hit the button and went to bed. And then the next day, I wrote like a little description. Yeah.
People love reacting to stuff like that too. So, you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing for getting it out there. So when you're talking about leaving things out, though, you know, you mentioned like stories that don't go anywhere, so on and so on. But did you have any situations where you thought it was a story that was going nowhere, and suddenly like, it's like, oh no, this is great. This is like good stuff.
No, actually, you know, everyone had. I think I got pretty lucky with the people that are in it. I mean, you know, a lot of the people I knew anyways, so I know they're good storytellers. And apparently, I didn't know this when I interviewed you, for example, by myself. Mm-hmm. But my wife was with me for a couple of them, and she just told me that like there would always be a part where there'd be this weird stall with whoever I was interviewing, and then I'd always find a way to kind of like get them back going again, which was a skill I didn't know I had.
You didn't know you needed to know what was happening, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. And so, you know, I mean, there's a couple people that I thought, oh, they're only going to want me to interview them for a half hour. Well, like Albini, for example. Mm-hmm. I didn't have very long to interview him. I only had about an hour. And I just figured I'll just ask him 5-6 questions. That'll be it. But I showed him, like, I got through the questions. I was like, well, you know, we got a half hour. These are the other questions I was going to ask you. And he just looked at it, I was like, oh, I'll answer all those. And he just like went through and he kept finding other stuff to talk about. And that happened with a lot of people that I'd say like, you know, unless you want to talk about this, and they'd be like, oh yeah. I mean, you know, once they got into it, you know, I didn't interview anybody that was like looking at their watch the whole time and just wanted to get out of there. Like they, you know, once they started going, like they were really into kind of the idea of, you know, the mechanics of it and stories too. A lot of people really responded to just like how you're supposed to conduct yourself when you're in a band on tour in the first place. You know, because there's a certain expectation from the place you're playing too. You know, and I thought that was really important. It kind of there was that might be on the cutting room floor for the most part, but I thought it was really distilled in that part that Andy talks about, where he just say, don't play too long. You know, if your stuff breaks, it comes out your time. You know, those 4 things he talks about. Those are like universal right there.
No, it's almost like there's the here's the advice for a young band section. Yeah. Like I was super glad that was in there, because it's something that, you know, if you're someone that's only ever played locally, maybe you might not think about it. If you're not even someone that plays music, maybe you never thought about it. But I think that's another kind of, you know, for lack of a better term, teachable moment for that. You know, okay, that doesn't have any effect on the grand scale of like equality within the world. No, but it's funny and it's real and it's actually important advice that everybody should follow. So it hits on a few levels, and it's just like, that's kind of like there's a subsection within the movie that so many violators of that. It makes for interesting stories, but what it doesn't make is for an interesting show for anyone usually. Right.
Well, you know, it's funny when I started talking about, you know, well, how do you think you should act on tour? And I couldn't quite get it right. And what I ended up with saying was like, you know, when you're on stage and you're waiting for the next band to get off stage, and they start doing that,
they start twirling
literally everybody knew what I was talking about. And that's even before I interviewed Ryan, where he did the exact same thing.
Well, and one of, you know, in one of my,
it's like you see that, and that's the death knell for like, boy, this is just going to take forever for this person to get off the stage, isn't it?
It's cultural shorthand that.
Sorry, Mark.
He's so I was in a previous band. It was a show in Salt Lake City, and we had traveled through Nevada, and you know, we kind of, myself and the drummer kind of got the gambling bug. Every time we stopped for gas, we would like, you know, play the slot machine. Oh, I won $9. Oh, wow, cool. You know, so we started. So the first show outside of Nevada we played, which is Salt Lake City, we made bets about if the local band would or would not try to break down their drums on stage on a Monday at a 3-band bill. Oh. And of course, the second you started twirling the nut, I'm like, ah!
Yep, there it is.
And everyone was like, what? Why is that one guy like pissed off, and the other guy is like super stoked. It's like, well, I just won $20. That's why.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there is a part
More
I
than
cut
paid
out.
for the show, by the way, just to be
Yeah.
clear.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I made more off that bet than I did playing. I don't want to call her out, but in that part talking about getting your stuff off stage really quick, I did cut out a scene where Hosey said, someone came up to me and told me I was taking too long once, because when she was first starting to play drums, and but she's like, but I learned from that experience. Someone was nice about it. They said like, hey, could you kind of get your stuff off the stage quick, because we're cutting into our time. And I think at first she was like, I think at first I was offended, and later on I was like, oh no, we're totally eating up their stage time here. So get your shit off the stage as quick as you can. But and there's nothing wrong with telling somebody like, maybe somebody that starts off on a new instrument or
they're not thinking about it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong.
There's nobody gets handed like a here are the rules. Here's if you do this, you're not going to be thinking about it, and it doesn't make you a dick, but it does make you thoughtless because you are not thinking about it. So now think about it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Yeah, and I think that's important because, and again, not that like here's the rule book for punk rock or whatever, but I mean those kinds of things are incredibly, they're not sexy. They can be funny, but like it's important. It's how a show not only becomes a success but becomes enjoyable for all the parts. Ideally, and it just requires a modicum of thinking about other people and thinking about the other bands, thinking about the audience, thinking about everything, thinking about the fact that it's like Monday and there's 5 bands, whatever. It's like, what I wanted to actually ask you about was, so there's a lot of folks in the movie from all different areas and different levels of notoriety. I appreciated the fact that it wasn't just a bunch of pasty white dudes from the Midwest, though. Like, did you have that in mind when you were?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, and I'm honestly, I'm still kind of disappointed that I didn't get it a bit more. I asked a lot of different people, and at the end, I kind of just was like, well, this is these are the people that said yes, and I'm glad they said yes. But I asked a whole bunch of other people that they weren't able to do it simply because they couldn't. I asked Rachel Flotard from Visqueen to be in it, and she said yes, but then she had a baby. And and it was just, I mean, now I understand because I have a kid myself. At the time I was like, oh, just put him in the other room, right? No, you can't really do that. So I understood that. I'm trying to remember who else I asked. But I tried to get as well. Another interesting thing is the very first person I interviewed was Christina from Visqueen. She was the first person I interviewed, and I was kind of hoping it would kind of go, we'll say 50-50 with men, women, for example, and it just didn't happen that way. I turned down a bunch of people.
Really? Anything you can speak about?
No. I mean, it's not that I turned them down. It's more like someone said, hey, I could get this person to be in it. And I was just thinking to myself, another dude, like,
sure.
I mean, it's getting kind of ridiculous now. And I would say that, no, I'm okay. Oh, that's all right.
Well, and I think that's, there's a fine line, but the fact that it is inclusive, I think makes it a stronger film also, because I think that there's a version of this film you could make that would be kind of what a lot of people probably just assume it is, I guess. And I don't think that would be nearly so interesting. And it also, again, I'm just going to go back to my original kind of opening statement that the different people that are in it are all important, but it's about everyone that tours. It isn't about any specific, it isn't like, hey, here's the story of the Black Flag guys and how they blah 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 blah. No, it's like this is the whole kind of hidden subclass of people that do this, and frequently they themselves do not know why or are able to justify it to loved ones. And again, it's as far as I'm concerned, it's a wild success because of that, because it does all the things. Now, are you going to come away being, quote unquote convinced? Well, it's not a convince me kind of film.
No.
But I think seeing the different stories and the overlap between the stories from all these different folks, it's powerful and it's important. And I think that that's something that, I don't know. I think it would not have been successful if you yourself had not, first of all, cut your teeth doing all those Bismarck tour documentaries, but B, also had like just a vested interest in documenting a thing, which is what a documentary should be, and that some people seem to forget about.
Yeah. Well, I this is literally one of the movies I've always wanted to make.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably why I didn't give up on it when I should have several times. I'm going to also say there was a year where I literally just said, I'm never going to look at this thing again. It's probably never going to get finished. I'm just done with it. I never want to talk about it again. And something happened and I just went like, I think it's probably because it's impossible for me not to finish a project, that it started to really eat at me. And so then I started working at it again. And then I finally was like, hey, it's just, I kind of, I like it now. Cause it's like with anything, every album you make, at some point you just go like, this album sucks. Tell me you do that. Does it?
Yeah. Like, well, or just like, who cares? This is,
or who
like,
cares? Yeah.
Whatever. Like, dude, this is stupid.
But there's always, something that you go like, but I got this far, so I need to finish it now.
That's where that song "Sunk Costs" come from, actually. But I guess it's important to note too that without having the outside pressure of course, the people that you talk to knew that it was a thing you were working on, it was going to happen, but you didn't have like a producer asking you for a deadline. You didn't have like, oh well, we gotta have the rough cut in time for Cannes. Like none of that.
I didn't even care. No, there's no way. I had someone just tell me, hey, you should submit this to South by Southwest, and I was like, I'll send it in, and then they're like, you'll probably have to take it off of YouTube. I'm like, nope. If that's the case, I don't think I'll do it. If they tell me I have to take it off, which they might, I don't know. But I don't care about winning awards or anything like that. I just wanted people to watch it, really, and people are watching it. So there we go.
So on that, would there be any thoughts towards having on one of like the major streaming services? I guess everybody wants everything to be exclusive, so you'd have to take it down from YouTube, huh? Yeah.
Well, I had a person ask me or offer, and I don't know. I'm still thinking about it.
I mean, what? I mean, I don't think I need to tell you, but that was a lot of time and effort that you put into it. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to get some kind of reward out of, other than spiritual, right?
Yeah. But the thing is that, like, I don't know. I mean, so what happens? You get this idea in your head that like it's gonna reach a different level, and if it doesn't, does that mean you're disappointed in yourself? But it's like you shouldn't be disappointed in yourself if you made something that you like and other people liked. And in this case, at least, a lot of people watched it, far more than I ever thought was going to.
Yeah, and continue to watch it too, which I think is key. Like it's the fact that it seems like someone will share it, and then like, oh wow, that's cool, I didn't know about this, that's awesome. And then people want to share their experience in the comments, and like so you have that collaborative piece of it. And it almost seems like that is the perfect vehicle for the documentary because of that, because it is allowed. Again, YouTube comments are like a constant tire fire in most cases, but the fact that there is like community involvement with people having discussions about what they just saw, like within the comments, that's a beautiful thing.
Well, and I like to read, the comments, and I have answered a bunch of. Sometimes every once in a while there'll be some kind of snarky comment, and I'll jump in and I'll say something, and they'll be like, "Oh, they weren't expecting that.
I didn't think you were going to respond." Yeah.
I've had exactly one person say the movie was too long. One, and I just said, I can't remember what I said. I think I said like, well, the first cut was 2.5 hours long, and I cut about a half hour, so you get a 2 hour long movie. Actually, no, I know exactly what I told them. I said those Transformers movies are 2 hours and 40 minutes long, so I'm going to make a 2 hour long movie about touring. It's just end of story.
I I almost threw on that Army of the Dead movie this afternoon, and I was like, 2 hours and 30 minutes. Are you kidding me? For this?
Well, after coming off of a 4-hour Justice League movie? Oh man.
Everyone needs an editor, man.
I think, I'm sure if I was going to go through it again, there are some parts where I figured like, this is getting a little long and maybe pounding the point a little bit too much. But then I just thought like, but the point will be made. That's
sure. And so to speak, if you can, a little bit about what you ended up leaving out. I mean, you mentioned the whole tour routing thing, which again could be a sub-documentary of itself. But were there any sort of major dropped?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I didn't mention that Andy played in Bush, for example.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I put it in the credits just to mess with people, and maybe to tease them a little bit, so you can be like, that jerk, But he did tour in that band for a time. He told me about it. He said, he's like, oh, it was great. It was like I got paid a lot, and he's like, all the members of the band are super nice, and
all the stuff that sucks about being in a band, didn't have to do any of it. Just
exactly.
Yeah, great.
He's like, I just rode in the tour bus, and everything was set up for me. And I just I cut the part out because honestly, it's in the Silkworm documentary. And it's like, if you want to hear that story, go and watch the Silkworm documentary, which is fabulous, by the way.
It is, but it occurs to me, as much as I like that story and that moment in time, and you love hearing about it, it would have seemed kind of out of place in the movie. It would seem, what is it? Draw out the similarity by showing a contrast or something. It's sort of like, oh, that's cool, but that's not what this is about.
Yeah. So, that got the cut. I'm thinking there's an entire sequence that, you know what? There's one sequence I was really looking forward to putting together, and I didn't even put it together, but I will later. And it was just about all the bands getting their name misspelled on marquees or posters. And it's really, to me, it's really funny because my band always gets their name misspelled.
Right.
And our crowning achievement, and I have the poster somewhere. I don't know, I might have lost it in the move somewhere, or it might be in the practice space in the bin. But we actually played at a show in Bismarck, North Dakota, where they spelled the Bismarck wrong. And and it's like, really? Yeah. But yeah.
And those can be funny stories. Like I recall, I believe it was a show in Chicago. This guy very studiously wrote out Conan, Neutron, and the Super Friends. and since he just was doing the marquee, is like, hey, I just need you to know that's not the correct band name. He's like, no, it definitely is. And I'm like, it definitely isn't. It's like, no, that's absolutely what it is. I'm like,
bring out a record and point to it.
And I was like, I have a pretty good authority that it is not. He's like, well, why would you say that? I'm like, because I'm Conan Neutron.
Yeah, and here's the secret.
and then he like, oh, let me check the email, and he's like, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you see the merge setup that like has a okay.
Yeah.
But
so just for example, like you have there was Cody was in the Young Evils, and he said on half of the tour, I think he said half of one of the tours they went on, probably one of the earlier ones, they just kept pointing down the Young Elvises. And it was just like, how do you even do that? And of course you have the type roads from way back when. You have Prophet No Lord Shall Live. Yeah. And people would just go like, I'm not gonna put that up. They put like Behead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course,
long band names definitely have like that level of challenge to it. The people, I'm not going to write that much out, or we don't have that many letters for the sign. I've gotten that one before.
Yeah.
But it still happens too. I mean, I remember there was a show in Denver, Replicator played, where we walk up and the marquee says Replican.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and really? There's how many letters are in Replicator? Like, you couldn't.
I think Joe had a good one. because he thought thrones, no one would have a problem with writing thrones.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, but sometimes you get thorns. Sometimes you get, like the thrones. Usually people will throw the in front of just anything.
Sure, the indefinite article, yeah.
I swear, one time I can't, and this, like I said, I haven't watched the footage, but I think he said one time on the marquee, it said Melvin's guy.
Wow.
Something like that.
That's more words and letters than the actual name of the band. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't watched that footage forever, so maybe I'm wrong, but I it's stuck in my head. So I think that is something that actually happened to him. So I'll go check my notes.
What did you end up doing for the video editing and production? What did you use?
I used Premiere Pro. And I mean, what's kind of funny is it took me so long to do it. I have this thing where I don't update Premiere Pro while I'm working on something. So I started editing this movie in 2018. And so by the time I got done, a friend of mine who worked on the audio of it, this guy named Matt, he works for Adobe, and I sent it to him, and he was like, dude, you're running like Premiere Pro 2018.
Yeah.
I was like, I know, I don't update until I'm done with the project. And I started doing this 3 years ago, but it ended up being just fine. I will update it now though. I can finally do it.
Well, and so that kind of begs a follow-up then of how did you stay organized and kind of stay on task and prioritize? Again, knowing that there isn't any outside entity, prodding you for a date or timeline or anything along those lines.
So I have a weird process, and I do this with every video I do, including the Bismarck documentaries. What I do is I start off by, I go and I do it, like I go on tour and film them at the same time, which by the way is like daunting. And but I'm just kind of used to it now. And they help me out too. Like I'll, hand them the camera and like, no, you interview me now. But when you get back from tour, the last thing you want to do is, hey, let's go revisit all that.
What were the miserable moments of this tour? Yeah, let's go.
Let's put it together now. So I don't do it. What I do is I end up, I play like a video game, and then I start to feel really guilty that I'm spending all this time on some silly video game when I have an entire project sitting in my hard drive I have to do. So then I play the game, and my reward after I play the game is that I go and I edit this thing. And it's a foolproof, it works every time. I feel guilty that I'm doing something mundane, and then I reward myself by doing something creative, and then it's like this cycle continues. It just keeps doing that. Like even right now, like I just finished making a feature movie, and I'm like, well, that was like a month ago. What am I gonna do next? And luckily next is the next Bismarck album, so I got something in the can, to do.
Yeah.
But if I didn't, I don't know. I'd find something probably.
Well, and did you find that the commonality of experience with the touring documentary, has that brought in any like outside interest or sort of new opportunities thus far?
I don't know. Probably not. Well, what do you mean? Like,
well, I mean, it's made the rounds. Some of the people, if it's not going out to people that actually work in the quote unquote industry or not, it's certainly people that are adjacent to the industry. It's not an outside possibility that somebody could discover it, say, hey, this is great. What's the next documentary you're doing?
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. I've only had maybe a couple things like that here and there. Mostly people saying like, well, what are you going to do with this now? And I just kind of like, I don't know, leave it on YouTube for people to watch for right now. It's only a month old. Later on, maybe I'll think of something. Maybe a physical copy. I don't know. I'm just kind of washing my hands of it right now and stepping away for a little bit and just kind of seeing what people say about it, and let people watch it for free.
Were there any parts that you cut out that kind of were like, I wish I could have justified leaving that in?
Yes, a lot of parts.
And
I actually
bring to mind.
The first one that pops into mind is Matt from Wimps had a really good part where he says, friends of his ask him, aren't you trying to make it? And he says, no. And he kind of goes a little bit more. He's like, he knows a lot of people, he's like, well, I know some people that make a living at it. They're not really doing that well. It's not, it doesn't last very long, really. And if you get famous, then okay, sure it does. But if you don't, yeah. So I cut that part out. I don't know why, I just did. But every once in a while, I think just it's important for someone to have said out loud, we're not doing this for a living, or I wouldn't want to make a living at it.
Yeah.
And I think what I did instead was I just kept the part where Joe talks about how he was making a living at it and he didn't like it. And so I figured those two were close enough. And so I picked one or the other.
Yeah. How did you differentiate between segments where folks are maybe repeating things versus reinforcing things? Meaning that, obviously you're talking to a lot of different people about similar subjects. So there's going to be overlap. But did you find that, in the telling of maybe a piece of it by one person and a piece of the other, it was more reinforcement? Sometimes it's like, well, somebody already said that. So maybe there
are a lot of redundancies. People said the exact same thing. So I just kind of picked one. But usually I just said who's had too much screen time, and then I got rid of theirs. I literally could have made this entire movie with five of the people I interviewed. They talk about everything, and it was really tough for me to cut some of the parts out just because I really liked some of their answers. But someone else didn't get some screen time, so I just decided I'll just have them answer it instead. So I feel like it's pretty even throughout. I mean, people have way more time than others, but I think everyone gets. I think when I was looking at it at the end, when I watched it for the millionth time, I was going through everybody's name and saying, what's my favorite thing they talked about? And everybody had one.
That's awesome.
Like every single person had a story that I thought stuck out for me. Like Cody, for example, isn't in the movie that much. He was the second person I interviewed, so I didn't ask him any questions. But he tells one of my favorite stories, which is the one about the professional wrestler playing a show above his house, above where they're playing. Yeah. Essentially, that's really the only thing he says in the movie, other than just having a couple little parts here and there. Yeah. And he has a really good band breakdown story too. But that story's great. I laugh every time I think about it. So yeah, I think everybody had their. Some people had more than one moment, sure. But everyone had one. Here's the part I cut out. I cut out a scene with you in it, actually, that I'll definitely restore, or I'll put on the B-roll. And it's just because I couldn't get anyone to understand this, which is, oddly enough, I think the Dave Grohl movie did a good job at. And that's like the tour humor that you develop.
Oh, right, sure.
Yeah. You had a great example of it. And actually, I got Nate to talk about it, who was in the Bismarck, and Dan, I got them to talk about it. And when I played it for people, nobody laughed at it. It was just like nothing. So I just kind of went, well, I guess you had to be there. Bye.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and isn't that most tour humor anyway? Of
yes.
Like, why are these four people laughing at this? Because they have this shared experience, and it's tour humor.
Yeah, but like that part made it in. The shared experience part made it in. Yeah. I just had an actual illustration, like the can you fuck magic thing, and yeah. And exactly. With the Bismarck, it was that when the going got rough, Nate Marshall would speak in his Neil Young voice, or we'd start talking in Maine accents, and we all have terrible Maine accents, like fake ones, so they just sound like Fred Gwynn from Pet Sematary.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes
sometimes that's better. Park your car over there. I see a spot open. Yeah, but it's funny to us, to the Bismarck. I think that's hilarious. Everyone else, but we have done that. We've slipped where we've gotten to that part on tour, day 6 or 7, and we're unloading the equipment, being like, no, don't take that. There, I'll take this. Oh yeah, like that. And people are looking at us like we're crazy. Why are they talking like that? Yeah.
But it's an important aspect of tour too. Even though it may be near impossible to quantify and apparently accurately document that in an entertaining fashion.
I thought the Roll movie did do a good job, though. They had a part in there that I was like, okay, well, good, he got that part right. I couldn't get it right. That's one of the parts in this movie I actually really liked. The middle of that movie, I think, is really good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think if it had been all just that, it would have been a great
Yeah,
film.
I think it would have been really good, and I would have been in real trouble.
As it is, I thought it was solidly okay. Like that was an okay. I didn't feel like I wasted my time watching, which I guess that's a win in and of itself. Maybe not what he was going for though.
Yeah,
you were dealing with a lot of different recording situations for getting people, like different, in some cases adverse, not exactly ideal sound quality. Some of them are done in clubs. Some of them, it's you got noisy elements. How much of a challenge was that, both in shooting and editing?
Okay, so some of it's my own dumbass, and also keep in mind I didn't have a crew. It was just me. I was doing the interviews, essentially the audio, which is really just a clip-on mic, and then the camera too. So it goes out of focus in a couple spots. Well, I literally just didn't notice because I'm interviewing.
Right, you're trying to do a couple things at once. Sure, yeah. Yeah.
So one of the worst things that happened in there, well, there's another one that's far worse, but we'll stay with the filming. Was the first 3 people I interviewed, I had this really crappy camera. I mean, it was a good camera, but it didn't have an audio readout. And so I just, I'll set it the default, fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. And for some reason I didn't go and listen to it later. I just did the first 3 interviews, and then I sat down and did it. Well, what happened was I had turned it down so low for a show that I recorded, but that's how their audio came out too.
Wow.
And so I literally went like, oh God. And I was like, oh, I'll fix it in post. And then I think I even told them, like, I need to interview you guys again. And they all said yes. But then I started fiddling with it a bit, and I got to sound better. And then, like I said, Matt, who did the audio, got to sound really good, or as best as he could. And now I just kind of like, it's fine. It's fine. I've seen documentaries that had way worse audio than that.
Totally, yeah. Well, and that's the kind of the nature of the form, is that you're not going to have ideal sound, right? So.
Yeah, and I also, that camera had this weird thing. You can't see it because I fixed it. Where it kept going in and out of focus somehow. I don't know how. Like I said, it was at the end of its legs. That was my touring camera for the Bismarck for a couple of years, and it had been dropped and probably punched in anger a couple times. Maybe by me, maybe by a member of the band. Get that out of my face, Eric. That type of thing. But yeah, that camera's at the end, so I had to ditch it and get another one. And then I didn't know how to use it for one of the interviews, so I kind of screwed that up. Like just the white balance I didn't get right. But once again, I fixed it in post. And then after that, it was pretty smooth. I got a really nice camera, and I was like, oh God, I wish I would have had this 4 years ago.
Right.
But
do you feel like having the right tools for the job was important to making the documentary all that it is?
Yeah, well, I mean, my God, not having an audio readout when you're making a film, and you're interviewing people, and you're like, well, it's not a visual thing. It's, I need to hear what they're saying, and you just kind of like cross your fingers, like, I hope it's working. Oh, also that camera didn't have an audio jack, so I couldn't even wear headphones to hear it. And yeah, I mean, that's dumb when I look at it now, but
you have to have faith, which is not the best.
Well, and it ended up not being true either. It was screwed up, and that was really dumb, but it turned out all right.
How much of your bandmates in the Bismarck did you, the amount that you choose to include them, was that like a decision you thought too much about, or was it just sort of like, were you treating them like any other subject within
yeah, I treat them like any other subject. The 2 stories that are in there, I only put in because they illustrated kind of illustrated a point that every other people had talked about. But I found there wasn't really a story about it. But that was like, well, my band has two great stories about this. Playing with a band that just completely imploded on stage. I had footage of them, for God's sakes.
Right.
And of the venue and the whole night. So I just figured, well, I'll tell that story. I mean, it's pretty quick. It's only like 5 minutes into the movie. And then the first story, like that's one, it's like one of my favorite Bismarck stories. And it's like, I think it's kind of a classic.
Sidewinders around, it comes back. Like it's a good hook.
And that's the thing. Is so it's a movie like this, I had no idea how I was going to start it. I think I was going to start it originally with nudity getting robbed, because that story is actually a lot longer. I just cut it down quite a bit and just kept them getting robbed part. But there's like a whole thing in them in Oklahoma City and how weird Oklahoma City was, and and it was going to end with them getting robbed, and then credit sequence, whatever. But then when I put together the Bismarck story, I put it way over by the van section. Like, here's, everyone talks about their van, and then it was going to be a story about here our van crapped out. But then as I watched it, I kind of just went like, I don't know, this is like one of those James Bond mini missions, like, it hits on all the things that the movie touches on later. Right. Your van sucks, you're on tour, and you're done. It's at the end of the tour, and you're all kind of tired of each other, even though you're all still friends. You've really had enough of each other at that point.
Yeah, you've been at sea for a while. Yeah.
And of course, the capper of that is that two members get stuck on a bus for 2 more days. And so it's it's funny. It's like it's a story that I feel like it hooks someone in. Like, if you're into that beginning, you're probably gonna like the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it's definitely a product for you, for sure. Yeah.
and if you don't, then you're just. I had somebody say like, oh, I couldn't even get through that first boring story. It's like, not the movie for you then. That's fine. Move on.
Yeah. No one is gonna miss you, and nobody cares about it. Did you ever is there any thought to maybe doing like a soundtrack accompaniment, like a release or anything like
that? No.
Like spirit of the film, because the music does feature somewhat heavily in and I got permission from all the bands to use it, maybe not the record label. So let's put it this way, I contacted one record label specifically, because there was one song they said, yeah, you probably have to ask the label if you can use it. It's fine, it's fine at the bands. All the bands said yes. If there was said no, I wanted to use their songs. Sure.
But I contacted everybody, which took forever. And I never quite, let's put it this way, I never got a no from that person. So it was in the movie. And there was a part of me that when I was put it up on, I sent the movie to them. I said like, hey, I used the song by this band that's on your label. Yeah. If it's not cool, let me know now, please. I can fix it.
Or it has like 70,000 views. Yeah.
Yeah. And they never said anything about it. And the copyright claim didn't come up, if you know that, when you put something on YouTube. I just figured like, okay. Yeah. Also, I haven't made any money off of it. So it's not like, I could be like, oh, I'll give you, you know what? I'll tell you, I'll give you 50% of the profit. And you turn your thing,
Yeah.
Like, here you go.
Make you a deal you can't refuse. It's gonna be happy.
The soundtrack's good. It's tough to pick songs. It's tough to pick songs for something like that, because you need to find, you can't have much singing or loudness on it. So I used a bunch of Helms Alee songs, but I always had to cut it off right when it got like
bombastic.
Yeah. And I could see it on the timeline. It's like da, 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 and you see the big wave coming.
The waveform gets really huge.
Yep.
Yes.
And I'm like, God, I hope it syncs up. And I got lucky with a couple of times. But something that's interesting is that first song, the Lozen song. I just went through every band who was in there, or really I went through every person who was in their bands. So that's why, like Wowza for Kalamazoo is in there. Like, you know, that's Isaac is in that band, so I'll you know, and that work music's happened to work really well. So I went back and I listened to some Lozen albums, and I looked at how long that song was, and I thought to myself, like, wow, it's like 7 minutes and 40 seconds long. That beginning sequence is 7 minutes and 40 seconds long. What if it syncs up perfectly? And it synced up perfectly.
That's so great. I love that.
And I couldn't believe it. I was literally like watching it going like this is crazy how well this works. Yeah. So I got real lucky with that one. Plus that song's great and that band's great too.
Absolutely. And kind of underrepresented in the music world. So it was great to hear that there. So I guess one of like the big takeaways for a lot of people is in the fact that this is not a glamorization of touring. It isn't. It is, but it also was not a nonstop tale of woe either. I think it is a good thing of saying that obviously there are arduous things that happen with it, but there's a reason why people keep doing it.
Right.
And did you ever feel that you were leaning maybe one way or the other too much with those sides of things, meaning make it too much of a miserific slog or too much education?
That's why that's why the ending is there. And I mean, I think the ending kind of ties it together with, you know, you ask people why they even do it in the first place, and everybody had well, actually, at first they didn't have an answer. Almost everyone completely shut down when I asked them that question, and they just kind of fumbled for a bit and said, like, I don't know, because you know, I think Dave even says, you know, don't ask me why. Maybe if I think about it too much, I won't anymore. You know, and you'd be amazed how many of the people didn't have an answer at first, and then they thought about it, and then they gave, pretty much everyone gives the exact same answer. You know, really. And it's interesting because when I was writing down the questions to ask people in the film, and I didn't have a title for the film, I didn't have one for a long time, and I showed my wife, my girlfriend at the time, these are all the questions I'm going to ask them. What else should I ask them? And she asked, why do it in the first place? And I almost gave her this answer. I almost gave her this, like, you know, how dare you ask that?
First of all, secondly, that's a pretty good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm personally offended. Of course, there's a reason, and it's like it's because I don't know. Yeah.
I'm gonna get back to you on that.
I'll get back to you on that one. And then I wrote it down, and I'd ask people, and they just froze almost every single time. They just kind of went, because it's just something I do. You know, a lot of people just said it's just, you know, but doesn't Joe say that? He's like, that it's just part of my life. It's just something I do. Yeah. Some of those people have been doing it since they were, I think Dave said he went on his first tour when he was 16.
Yeah.
And, yeah. I mean, some of those people, Joe goes all the way back to the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of crazy. I mean, obviously Albini does too. And Tim and Andy from Silkworm. Yeah, they go way back.
Well, and it's, I feel like you touched on that too, with the different ways that technology has changed touring too. Like, you know, the days of the Atlas, loose in the van.
That part got cut out a little bit. I think I wanted to just, well, first I couldn't find any maps. You know, I was like, I don't have a map anymore. But you know, they talk about that in the Dave Grohl documentary. You know, so I'm glad it didn't make the cut in mine, because hey, if you want to watch, go watch his movie. He does a pretty good job with that. Yeah. It's weird. Some of the stuff that I didn't make the cut in my film was in his. You know, so it's like you could watch them both together if you want.
Yeah, fill in the blanks for each other, right?
Yeah.
The doc's great, man. You knocked it out of the park. I mean, I know I already said that a few times, and I've certainly opined in multiple platforms about it, but I'm really glad you did it. I'm really glad it's good.
Me too. Like, I got a question. Were you bracing for it to be not good? Like, were you kind of like, I mean, you'd seen all the other stuff I did.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you probably had an idea what it was going to be like, but when you finished it and you watched it the first time, where you're like, well, I didn't think actually like it. It's like it was a friend of mine made it.
I knew it was at least going to be interesting, but you never know. I mean, there's plenty of times I've been, oh my God, I can't wait to see that. That looks so great. And it was like, yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It was okay. Like it did some of the things I wanted to do. It was good. And then in this case, my expectations were pretty high, and it was actually better than I thought it was going to be. So I think that's, and what I didn't
praise. I like it.
Yeah. I didn't like I said, I didn't expect the commonality of purpose and the fact that it isn't about any one band or entity to kind of be such a repeated theme. And I thought that is kind of what makes it powerful. So yeah, that was maybe the biggest surprise to me, because I wasn't even, I was like, oh well, I don't know, there's a lot to cover. Let's see how he puts it all together.
Yeah.
And I think that's resonated with people.
When I finished interviewing Joe, I kind of interviewed him around the middle, so I had way more questions. And when I got done, he just went, "Man, I do not envy you putting this movie together." He was like, like you got a task ahead of you.
Yeah,
and I think I waved him off. I was like, "Oh, I'll be done in a year or two," and then 5 years later, here it is.
Well, because that's the thing is, if you hand this to 25 different filmmakers, they're going to make 25 different films. There's so many ways to go with it, and it's, I don't know. It's I mean, to my knowledge, there's nothing quite like this that has existed before. So I'm really glad he did it, and I'm glad that people are responding to it and finding out about it. I think it's a nice thing in an era that is bereft of nice things often.
And really obsessed with like celebrity too, and
yeah, exactly. Like having that sort of like, well, here's the hook is it's got this famous famous person in it.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
and so, what we noticed, that's of course that goes back to the Dave Grohl thing too, is that it's not so much that I dislike any of the him or any of the people who usually end up in these documentaries. It's just that I've heard their side of the story, and
sometimes, yeah.
And then it becomes that thing where it's like, well, if you make a documentary like this, well, you just have to include the same 6 people. Well, you don't have to. There's other musicians out there.
Picturing a very sad Thurston Moore sitting by the phone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and once again, I love Thurston Moore.
Yeah.
I've seen him in plenty of movies.
Yeah,
and there's other people that should get a say, I think.
Absolutely, and I think you did a fantastic job with it, man.
Cool, thank you.
Any last thing that you'd like folks to know about the film, or anything that we didn't cover?
I don't know. I can't think of it. Well, I know there's something. I mean, I'll think of something, but I'll send you a message after we're done. I'll be like, I forgot to talk about this.
That's usually how it goes. Yeah, it's whatever. Well, if that's the case, that's the case. I think it's wonderful. And is there any? I mean, it exists at this point, solely on YouTube. Is there any, website or anything people should be thinking about, or anything along those lines, or just no?
I can't think about it right now. This is really, I picked an odd time to release a film that people had responded to. I was actually furiously trying to get it done before I moved into a house that my wife and I just bought.
Yeah.
And so when I hit the button, I literally woke up the next day and started packing, and and spent the entire week moving. And then, I kept getting messages about it. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm busy. Like I'm moving. Yeah. And then we had to do a bunch of stuff with the house. And so I just kind of just let it just sit there. This is the first interview I've done too. So,
well, hopefully first of many, because I think it's well worth everyone's attention. And
there's another one next week. I can't remember. I can't remember the name of the podcast. I have it written on my calendar, but I can't read it. But somebody else had contacted me, and I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" I don't know what it is.
I'm glad that you took the time to talk to me about it. I don't remember if I asked this when the Bismarck were in or not, or if I had the bit at the time. But I asked people when they're on the show, which is funny because it is something that kind of comes up a little bit in the title of the documentary as well as within the content. One can question, you can interpret it however you like, but why do you do what you do?
I don't know. It seems really weird that I made an entire film about why people tour. I can't come up with a ready answer myself. It might just go back to I've been doing music since I was 15, and then I stopped doing music for a while. I don't know if you know this. And oddly enough, when I moved to Olympia, Washington, I said I didn't want to play music anymore. But then I started becoming involved with some filmmakers. So I started making movies. And then the Bismarck started up. And then I did both kind of at the same time. And now it's almost like it seems like it's a job at this point. A job I guess I enjoy because I don't, it doesn't pay. I just keep why I keep doing what I do is I think I'm one of those people that likes what makes me happy is to start a project, see it through, and then see a result of some kind. With an album, you finish an album, and then you at least at some point you can say like, well, here you can see this, or you can listen to this. This is what my band sounds like.
Sure.
It's the same thing with movies. I get something in my head, and then once I start it, I have to finish the movie. If I start another one, I don't know. I have some ideas. I think I might have told you the ideas for some of the other films I have, and you said yes, do that. This sounds like a conversation that I remember. Yes. In fact, I think I told you the 2 movies I wanted to do, and you said the exact same thing for both of them. You said both those movies need to be made. And I agree. And for one of them, which I know I've definitely talked to you about, I still am floored that nobody has made this certain movie.
Right. Well, do it before Dave Grohl does. That's my advice.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to say it out loud in case he goes like, that's a great idea.
Good idea. I'm going to take that too.
I'm going to take that, and I'm going to make my documentary about a certain Pacific Northwest band that is famous that has never had a documentary made about it somehow. I don't know how. You probably figure it out. It's not Carp. They have a documentary.
Yeah, they do have a documentary.
But you're getting warm.
Eric, it's been great.
Okay.
Having you on. I really appreciate you. Again, can't say it enough. I think the movie's fantastic. Out of the park.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, thanks for coming on the show, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on solo this time. I guess.
Yeah, pretty sure the sound is at a better level than it was last time you were on, so that's good. But I have no sound meter to measure it, so how do I really know? Yeah,
that's true. It'd be like me interviewing those first 3 people. I just go like, oops.
That's also just in my own defense. That's also what happens when you set up quickly right before playing a show and don't bother to check beforehand. Whatever. I'll have the band on again at some point. Well,
we're gonna have a new album soon, so
come on then, and we'll make it happen.
All right, great.
Eric, thank you so much, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Take care, brother.
Bye.
There he goes. Let's hear a song by the Bismarck.
What you
All right. That's Max Bear by a little band called The Bismarck, which is Eric's band. They're great. That is off a record called Great Plains. That is it. That's it. That's it for this show. Again, if you didn't catch it the 17,000 times I said it, the documentary is called Why Am I Doing This? Parentheses, a film about touring. In parentheses. You can find it on YouTube for free because that's how Eric rolls. I love it. It's great. I hope, if you haven't already, that you check it out. I think it's well worth your time, obviously, especially if you like this show. Speaking of this show is called Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you very much for listening to it. This show airs usually Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific on RadioNope.com. Say yes to Nope. Archived at ProtonicReversal.com. Always free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding.
Mr. and Mrs. America, all the ships at sea.
If you like the show and want to get episodes of it sooner, Patreon.com/Protonic Reversal. $1 a month will get you there. We'll accomplish that goal.
I've got 50,000 watts of power.
Thanks so much for listening, as always. It's been a rough week.
I wanna ionize the air.
Enough said about that. Chris Brokaw coming up next, so stay tuned for that.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
Be good to each other. Stay safe out there.
Can you hear me now?
And take it easy.
Out on Route 128, you're dark and lonely.
Take it easy.
I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? 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 See you in the radio. And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner. If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio